Mason didn't expect anyone that late. The sun had just dipped below the treetops, casting the backyard in honey-colored light. He'd been halfway through sanding a piece of maple for a custom shelf when the doorbell rang. A faint chime, too, soft to match the jolt it sent through his quiet evening. He wiped his hands on his shirt, walked to the front door, and opened it. There she was. Elena. Her hair was longer than he remembered, darker at the ends, like the city had tried to leave its mark on her. She wore jeans, scuffed sneakers, and a hoodie 2 sizes too big. One duffel hung from her shoulder. Her eyes looked tired, not just from travel, something deeper. He hadn't seen her in 6 years. "Hey, stranger," she said, a crooked smile tugging at her lips. "Elena." Mason blinked, heart stalling for a beat. Wow. What are you doing here?" "Brady said I could stay for a bit," she said, referencing his older brother. "I'm between things. Life, homes, whatever. He mentioned you. Had a spare room." She glanced over his shoulder. "This okay?" Mason swallowed hard. Yeah, of course. Come in." She stepped inside, dropping her duffel gently like it held glass. He closed the door, suddenly very aware of how the house smelled. Cedar wood from the wall paneling, the faint bite of paint thinner from the garage. She breathed in. "Smells like you," she said, and something about the way she said it made his chest ache. He hadn't seen her since her wedding. She'd been all lace and laughter then, twirling in a white dress in the middle of Brady's backyard. He remembered watching her from a distance, 17 and tongue-tied, knowing she was the kind of beautiful he'd never touch. The crush had been harmless, he thought. Now she stood in the same house, alone, older, changed. He couldn't read her yet, not fully. The guest room's made up," he said, motioning down the hall. "Bathroom's just across. Towels are clean, I think." She smiled faintly. "Still polite, huh?" "Still trying," he murmured. She walked slowly, taking it all in. The wooden floors, the half-finished bookshelf leaning against the wall, the coffee mug on the table that read, "Measure twice, cut once." "It's nice," she said. "Feels lived in, real." He trailed behind her, hands in his pockets, not sure where to put his eyes. "You okay?" he asked finally. Elena paused in the hallway, glancing back at him. For a second, the mask slipped. "Not really," she admitted. "But I'll be better here, I think." Mason didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel quite so alone in his own house. That first night, after dinner, takeout, Chinese, eaten on mismatched plates. Mason found Elena sitting on the back steps, barefoot, a blanket draped over her shoulders. The stars were out, thick and bright, the kind of sky you didn't get in cities. He brought out 2 mugs of tea, handed her one without speaking, and sat beside her. She blew across the surface of the mug and gave a soft, tired sigh. "Still quiet out here." "Always is," he said. "Too quiet sometimes." They watched the sky for a while, letting the silence stretch. Crickets chirped in the grass. The air smelled faintly of honeysuckle and sawdust. "Elena," he said eventually, voice low. "You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to, but if you need to unload, I'm here." She took another sip of tea. "It wasn't dramatic," she said. "I think people expect stories, affairs, fights, slammed doors, but it wasn't like that." He waited, sensing more. It was like watching a faucet drip, one drop at a time. You think, "I'll fix it soon." But you don't. And then one day the sink's flooded and you don't know how you got there. She let out a small, breathy laugh. "Sorry, that's a dumb metaphor." "No," he said. "I get it." She looked sideways at him, studying his face in the half-light. "You look different, you know. Not a kid anymore." "I'd hope not." He gave a half-smile. "Been 8 years. You got taller, your face is sharper, but it's more than that. You seem steadier. Living alone will do that to you." She didn't say anything at first, just pulled the blanket tighter around her. Then, "You always were quiet, even back then. I used to wonder what You were thinking. Mason swallowed, his thumb brushing the handle of the mug. He looked at her, eyes soft. You, he said. Mostly you. She blinked. What? He gave a nervous shrug, like trying to hide the words after letting them slip. You were my first crush. Probably my longest one, if I'm being honest. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, but weighty. Elena didn't laugh. She didn't tease. She just looked at him, really looked, and said, I had no idea. I didn't want you to. You were married. You were everything. You still are. A breeze moved through the trees. Her hair lifted slightly, catching the moonlight. I was a mess back then too, you know, she said quietly. Just good at hiding it. Maybe, he said. But, to me you were untouchable. She didn't look away. And now? Mason's heart thudded. Now I don't know what you are, but you're here, and I'm glad. The next morning they made breakfast together. It was clumsy and sweet. Her trying to find things in unfamiliar cabinets, him burning the first batch of toast. She laughed when he dropped an egg on the floor and didn't stop until she was leaning against the counter, tears in her eyes. God, she said, catching her breath. I haven't laughed like that in weeks. He watched her as she wiped her eyes, the sound of her laughter still hanging in the air like music he didn't know he missed. Later, she sat on the porch, while he planed a piece of wood for a table leg. She asked questions about his work, his clients, the things he liked building most. He talked more than usual, about the satisfaction of shaping something with his hands, the joy of watching raw pieces fit together. Sounds like you figured it out, she said. Figured what out? Life, or at least your version of it. He thought for a moment. Maybe. It's quiet, but it fits. They spent the rest of the afternoon in that soft rhythm. Close, without touching. As if afraid that too much weight would shatter whatever was blooming slowly between them. They argued about frozen pizza in the middle of aisle 9. Mason had one in hand, pepperoni, cheap, probably terrible, and Elena stared at it like it personally offended her. You seriously eat that? She asked, raising an eyebrow. It's quick, tastes fine, doesn't require a recipe or effort. That's not food, that's cardboard with commitment issues. He laughed, tossing it into the cart anyway. I like cardboard. Remind me never to let you cook for me again. They kept moving through the store, half bickering, half laughing. It felt easy, lighter than anything Mason remembered. Elena walked with one hip cocked, reading labels like she was decoding a mystery novel, and she kept tossing things into the cart that made no sense. Red chili flakes, 2 types of jam, a plantain. That's not even ripe, he said, holding it up. Then we wait. Patience is part of the process. They left with far more than planned. Back home, they unpacked the groceries in comfortable sink, and she found a shoebox on the top shelf of a kitchen cabinet while searching for olive oil. What's this? She asked, already opening the lid. Mason winced. Old photos, mostly of Brady and me being idiots. She rifled through them with the enthusiasm of someone discovering buried treasure. One particular photo made her grin. Oh my God, she said, holding it up. Look at this. You were what, 16? He squinted. 17. That was the summer of Brady's graduation party. You had that swoopy emo hair? She said, laughing. And is that eyeliner? It was a phase. A glorious, unfortunate phase. She sat on the counter, still looking at the photo. You were so awkward back then. He leaned on the opposite counter, smiling. You were intimidating. I wore glitter eyeshadow and thought I knew everything. You did know everything, at least to me. She looked up at him, her smile faltering just enough to let something real pass between them. You've changed. Have I? She nodded slowly. You're still quiet. But there's a steadiness now. A weight. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. That night, they boiled pasta, her idea. And while the water took its time, she pulled her phone out and put on music. Something. Soft, old, familiar. She swayed a little as she moved around the kitchen, barefoot, humming. Mason stirred the pot, eyes following her as she danced absently, like she forgot he was there. But then she looked up and held out her hand. "Come on," she said. "I don't dance." "It's not dancing. It's moving with intention." He hesitated, then set the spoon down and stepped toward her. She placed his hands around her waist, hers resting lightly on his shoulders. They moved in slow circles, barely shifting their feet, the hum of the music low behind them. Her hair smelled like lavender and something citrusy, and her eyes were fixed somewhere near his collarbone. "This is nice," she murmured. "Yeah," he said, heart tripping. "It is." They pulled apart only when the water hissed over, but something lingered in the air, like the steam wasn't the only thing that had risen. Later that night, after dinner and dishes, they walked down the gravel path behind the house that led to the lake. The sky was heavy with clouds, thunder rumbling somewhere far off. Mason carried a flashlight, but Elena insisted on walking without it, saying she liked the way the dark made everything feel softer. The grass was damp from a brief shower earlier, the scent of wet earth rich in the air. She walked barefoot again, her shoes dangling from her fingers. They reached the edge of the lake and stood there quietly, watching the surface ripple in the wind. "This feels like the edge of something," she said. He glanced at her. "Good or bad?" "I don't know yet." Lightning flickered behind the hills, illuminating her profile. "Hey," he said, voice rougher than intended. She turned to him. He didn't wait for courage to catch up. He leaned in, slow, hesitant, lips brushing hers like a question. She answered with her own, a soft, uncertain kiss that deepened just a little before pulling back. "I didn't mean to do that," she whispered. "Me neither," he said, but neither of them moved away. Morning settled into a kind of rhythm neither of them spoke aloud. Mason would get up early, like always, and make coffee. Strong, black, the way he liked it. But he'd started brewing a second cup, lighter, with a splash of oat milk and honey, just the way Elena liked hers. She'd wander in sometime later, still wearing sleep-soft clothes, hair knotted up with no real effort, and she'd smile when she saw the mug already waiting on the counter. "You spoil me," she said once, sipping with closed eyes. He shrugged. "You reorganized my entire record shelf. I'd call it even." She had too. Alphabetized everything. Created little sticky note dividers. "You had the Rolling Stones under jazz," she pointed out. "I thought it was close enough." Sacrilege. They shared those mornings in a quiet, comfortable hush, music drifting low from a speaker, the dog-eared newspaper open between them. Afternoons passed in sun-drenched fragments. Errands, quiet walks, her reading on the porch while Mason sanded down lumber. Evenings were lazier, cooking together if they felt like it, or settling on the couch for whatever old movie she insisted. He had to see. They started on opposite ends, but more often than not, they'd wake with her legs tangled over his hand curled near her waist. But then something shifted. Elena grew quieter. She smiled less often, spaced out during conversations. Sometimes she'd disappear for hours without a word, coming back with stories about long walks or just needing air. Mason didn't question it, not out loud, but it sat in his chest like a small, smooth weight. He noticed the way she avoided his eyes when they touched, like even casual contact came with too many questions now. One night, she stayed in the guest room again for the first time in days. He said nothing, just made her coffee the next morning like always. On a Thursday, she came out of the bathroom dressed in something different, heels, a navy dress, eyeliner that made her eyes look impossibly deep. "Going out?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. "An old friend's in town," she said, avoiding the way his expression shifted. "Just catching up. Won't be long." "Okay," he said, nodding, but it didn't feel okay. He made dinner anyway. Chicken, roasted vegetables, even lit a candle because he didn't know what else to do. The house felt too quiet without her. Every sound echoed. She came back around 10. He heard the door open, soft footsteps, then saw her stop in the doorway to the kitchen. The table was still set. "You cooked," she said. "I thought maybe—" He trailed off. "It's cold now." She looked at the food, then back at him. There was something like guilt in her eyes. I should have texted. I didn't realize you were planning anything. It's fine, he said too quickly. Really? I wasn't on a date, she added, stepping out of her shoes. Just a drink. Catching up turned into staying longer than I meant. He nodded. You don't owe me anything. I know, she said softly. That's part of the problem. I don't know what I'm doing, Mason. I'm not trying to hurt you. She rubbed her arms like the room had gotten colder. It's all still messy, he set his glass down. I don't want to be a rebound. I don't want to be something you stumble into because everything else fell apart. But I'd wait if you asked me to. Elena blinked, eyes full of too many things. I'm not asking that yet, she said, barely above a whisper. Okay. They stood there for a long moment, the cold dinner between them, and something unspoken settling quietly into the space. The backyard was crowded, folding chairs in uneven rows, paper plates balanced on knees, kids darting through legs with juice-stained shirts. Mason hadn't wanted to come, not really, but his sister had insisted. Bring Elena, she'd said. It'll be fun. And for a while, it was. Elena blended in effortlessly, talking with neighbors like she'd always been part of the town. She wore a white blouse and jeans, simple but stunning. Her laughter carried over the hum of conversation, and every time Mason glanced her way, someone else noticed. He tried not to hover, tried to play it casual, but he caught himself looking, again and again. The way her hair fell over one shoulder, the way she leaned in when people spoke. She looked alive in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. You're not fooling anyone, his sister whispered when she pulled him aside near the grill. You keep looking at her like she invented gravity. It's complicated, Mason said, glancing away. Not from where I'm standing. He didn't answer. Across the yard, Elena stood near the patio, her head tilted as she listened to someone. Older, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone from school. Mason couldn't hear what was said, but he caught the flicker of discomfort that crossed her face. A polite laugh, a tight smile, and then she excused herself. She found him 10 minutes later, tapping his arm lightly. Want to take the long way home? They walked side by side down the quiet streets, lit by porch lamps and fading daylight. The air smelled like charcoal and freshly mowed grass. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence wasn't strained, just heavy with things neither had said yet. I heard someone tonight, she said eventually, talking about us. He looked over. Yeah? They called me your aunt, she said, a soft laugh with no humor in it. Said I was playing house. Mason's hands curled in his pockets. People talk. I know. She paused. But it hit me harder than I expected. They reached his porch, the old boards creaking under their steps. Elena sat on the top step, arms wrapped around her knees. Mason didn't sit right away. He waited. I don't know if I'm ready for forever, she said, staring out at the dark yard. I don't even know what that means anymore, but I don't want to walk away from this either. He exhaled, slow and steady, then sat beside her. Their shoulders barely touched. We don't need to know what it is yet, he said. You don't have to name it, just stay. She turned to look at him, eyes uncertain but soft. I'm not asking for anything more than what we already have, he added. Unless you want it. Elena reached out, her hand slipping into his like it belonged there. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. The path behind Mason's house twisted through tall grass and thick trees, barely more than a trail made by footsteps over time. Elena followed behind him, brushing branches away with her fingertips, her breath steady in the warm afternoon air. Where are we going? She asked, laughing softly as a leaf tangled in her hair. You'll see. They reached a clearing where the trees opened up just enough to let the light spill in like water through a crack. An old log sat near the edge of a shallow creek, smooth, from years of weather and use. Mason gestured toward it. She sat, eyes scanning the space. Quiet, green, hidden from everything. I come here when I need to clear my head, he said, settling beside her. Think things through, or just not think at all. Elena leaned back on her hands. It's perfect, like it doesn't belong to the world. He glanced at her. Neither do you sometimes. She smiled faintly, but there was something wistful in it. When I was a kid, I used to pretend I'd open a bookstore. Not just books, though, like shelves full of old paperbacks, but also coffee, big windows, quiet music, a place people could stay for hours and never feel rushed. He didn't answer right away, just looked at her, the way her face softened when she talked about things that mattered. Why didn't you? Life, she said. Marriage. Expectations. I kept thinking I'd circle back to it, but I never did. Mason reached into his bag and pulled out a small sketch pad. Tell me what it would have looked like. What? Your cafe. Your bookstore. Describe it. She raised an eyebrow, but slowly began to talk. Soft lighting, plants hanging in corners, mismatched tables, a reading nook with worn armchairs. As she spoke, Mason's pencil moved, lines and shapes beginning to form. You're actually drawing it? You told me what you wanted. Doesn't mean it can't still happen. Her eyes lingered on the page, then on him. You really believe that? I wouldn't have asked if I didn't. A breeze moved through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and something warm from the sun. Elena shifted closer. Her knee brushed his, and neither of them pulled back. You always listen like I'm saying something important, she murmured. Because you are. She leaned in slowly this time, no hesitation, no testing of the air. Her lips met his with quiet certainty, no questions, no panic, just a gentle press, soft and grounding. When she pulled back, her eyes stayed closed for a moment longer. I don't feel lost when I'm with you, she whispered. Mason rested his forehead lightly against hers. Then stay lost here with me, a little while longer. Her fingers found his, and they stayed like that in the clearing, sunlight flickering between leaves. The world outside held gently at bay. The suitcase sat open on the bed like a silent question. Elena moved slowly, folding clothes without rhythm, her movements mechanical. Mason watched from the hallway, unnoticed. She didn't hum like she usually did when she packed. She didn't curse under her breath at her lack of organization, just silence. He didn't ask her to stay. Instead, he made himself busy, sanding down a cabinet door in the garage that didn't need sanding, reorganizing tools he'd already organized twice. She was supposed to leave next week. That had always been the plan. But somehow, over days and coffee cups and shared glances, the plan had turned into something blurry. That night, he heard the water running in the bathroom longer than usual. When she came out, her eyes were red, her hair still damp, a towel wrapped around her like armor. She didn't say anything, just slipped past him and into the guest room. He found the note by accident, half crumpled in the trash, torn in two. He almost didn't read it, but curiosity won. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. What if staying feels like losing freedom? The words sat in his hands, heavier than he expected. He knocked once on the door, then stepped in without waiting for an answer. She sat on the edge of the bed, arms folded tightly across her chest. I found your note, he said. She didn't look at him. I get it, he continued. You've been untethered for so long, you forgot what safe could feel like. And I'm not asking you to stay because I'm scared you'll leave. I'm asking because I see what we have, and I think you do too. She still said nothing. You don't have to pick one or the other, he said, softer now. Freedom or love. We can make space for both. I swear to you we can. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Mason stood there a moment longer, then left her alone with the choice. The next morning, the smell of pancakes pulled him from sleep. He padded barefoot to the kitchen, still half dreaming. Elena stood at the stove, hair up, wearing one of his old flannel shirts. She glanced over her shoulder when he entered. You want one with blueberries? She asked. He didn't answer, just crossed the room and kissed her temple. She didn't leave. The backyard was full of life, folding tables draped in linen, mismatched chairs, vases of wildflowers, the sound of laughter layered over the hum of summer. Friends wandered with glasses of champagne and sticky plates of cake. Someone had brought a guitar. Mason's sister was in the corner making mimosas like it was a competitive sport. Mason stood on the porch, leaning against the post, watching it all unfold. But mostly, watching her. Elena was barefoot in the grass, holding a paper, plate in one hand, and gesturing wildly with the other as she told a story to a group of their neighbors. Her laughter rose above the crowd, bright and easy, like it belonged exactly where it was. The breeze tugged at the hem of her sundress. Her hair was messier than it had been an hour ago. She hadn't even noticed. He felt it then, deep and quiet, that this was home now. Not just the porch, the trees, or the way the sun filtered through the backyard. It was her. The way she'd made the space warmer without trying, the way her books filled the shelves beside his tools, how her laughter made even silence feel like something shared. A small boy, one of the neighbor's kids, no more than 5, ran up to her, clutching a juice box and looking up with wide eyes. "Are you Mr. Mason's wife?" he asked, unfiltered, innocent. Elena knelt in the grass, her dress pooling around her. She smiled, looking up just briefly to where Mason stood, watching. "Not yet," she said gently, brushing hair from the boy's forehead. "But he's mine." The boy seemed satisfied and dashed away, leaving her crouched there, eyes still on Mason. Later, after the guests had gone and the dishes were stacked in the sink and the leftover cake was covered with foil, Mason found her sitting on the porch swing, toes grazing the deck with every gentle sway. The air had cooled, and the sky had turned lavender. He sat beside her, letting the silence wrap around them. "You know," she said, resting her head on his shoulder, "I used to think I had to run to feel free. And now," she looked up at him, "now I think I was just running from the wrong places." He smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. They didn't need to say the rest. It was already there, in the garden she'd planted, in the paint they'd chosen together, in the rhythm of 2 lives that had slowly become one. She showed up with a suitcase and a tired smile. She stayed because somehow we both knew. Love was never about timing. It was about finding someone who makes you feel like you've finally arrived.